I was in Malawi when the COVID first emerged, and luckily I had already approved, so I didn't need to go to anyone else for permission, £10 million for pandemic preparedness, because we had already been fighting Ebola and cholera over the years, along with the Malawi health system. But as time ticked on, I was getting more and more a sense of unreality as the basic principles of public health, and particularly non-pharmaceutical interventions for prevention and protection, were being sidelined, abandoned, or trashed in other ways. So eventually I retired. I took early retirement and have carried on trying to do good work through other means. So what am I trying to do at the moment? And what I think is really inspired by some of the work that came out of last year's Unpolitics, is my particular focus has been on IAQ. As I'm not a clinician, I've come to public health through anthropology and psychology. And we all know, I think, the massive weight of evidence now on the importance of IAQ on many pathogens, pandemic and otherwise. But certainly from the last 5 years of my observation, I haven't seen policy or practical improvements that really are worth the name. However, what I have seen, and I will share with you, some commitments and promises exist and have been made, but have mostly been ignored. And I haven't seen indicators agreed. I haven't seen targets set, no budgets allocated, or any actions agreed. And the examples I give you here are the ones from my particular experience in international public health. So the Global Fund for AIDS, TB and Malaria, many of you will have heard of, the biggest TB funding agent in the world. It has in its strategy, its current strategy, got a clear section on goals for improving internal air quality, stung by the COVID appearance, but also around tuberculosis. Also, the WHO recent, December last year, COVID-19 plan, it has a clear paragraph on the importance of IAQ. The WHO's own TB guidelines have IAQ recommendations. And the Pandemic Accord, depressingly, as a contrast to that, is preposterously silent on pretty much any sort of prevention and IAQ as well. Now, why are they getting away with this? Because they make a commitment in one place. I mean, not many, but they are there. But the donors, the member states, the NGOs, the non-state actors, and I'll come back to them, the media, the professional bodies, they all seem to be looking away. They're not actually banging the drum and saying, hang on, you promised to do this. Where is any progress? And that's what I've been trying to do over the last few years, to try and see how can we raise attention to this and hold the relevant agencies accountable. I mean, I'm not picking on the WHO for this, but they are in some respects obviously the tip of the pyramid in terms of where one would hope good practice would cascade. So what I'm thinking already. So my goal, hopefully, is to look at mapping out who are the institutions who could be helpful, who WHO have to listen to, like these non-state actors, and to use targeted communications and media board conferences to actually bring pressure to bear and expose what is or is not happening. The last slide I want to share is this one, because it hands over lovely to Adam, who did excellent work last year on pushing for why are we using baggy blues? We may as well put a sack over our heads. I was in Malawi when the COVID first emerged, and luckily I had already approved, so I didn't need to go to anyone else for permission, £10 million for pandemic preparedness, because we had already been fighting Ebola and cholera over the years, along with the Malawi health system. But as time ticked on, I was getting more and more a sense of unreality as the basic principles of public health, and particularly non-pharmaceutical interventions for prevention and protection, were being sidelined, abandoned, or trashed in other ways. So eventually I retired. I took early retirement and have carried on trying to do good work through other means. So what am I trying to do at the moment? And what I think is really inspired by some of the work that came out of last year's Unpolitics, is my particular focus has been on IAQ. As I'm not a clinician, I've come to public health through anthropology and psychology. And we all know, I think, the massive weight of evidence now on the importance of IAQ on many pathogens, pandemic and otherwise. But certainly from the last 5 years of my observation, I haven't seen policy or practical improvements that really are worth the name. However, what I have seen, and I will share with you, some commitments and promises exist and have been made, but have mostly been ignored. And I haven't seen indicators agreed. I haven't seen targets set, no budgets allocated, or any actions agreed. And the examples I give you here are the ones from my particular experience in international public health. So the Global Fund for AIDS, TB and Malaria, many of you will have heard of, the biggest TB funding agent in the world. It has in its strategy, its current strategy, got a clear section on goals for improving internal air quality, stung by the COVID appearance, but also around tuberculosis. Also, the WHO recent, December last year, COVID-19 plan, it has a clear paragraph on the importance of IAQ. The WHO's own TB guidelines have IAQ recommendations. And the pandemic accord, depressingly, as a contrast to that, is preposterously silent on pretty much any sort of prevention and IAQ as well. Now, why are they getting away with this? Because they make a commitment in one place. I mean, not many, but they are there. But the donors, the member states, the NGOs, the non-state actors, and I'll come back to them, the media, the professional bodies, they all seem to be looking away. They're not actually banging the drum and saying, hang on, you promised to do this. Where is any progress? And that's what I've been trying to do over the last few years, to try and see how can we raise attention to this and hold the relevant agencies accountable. I mean, I'm not picking on the WHO for this, but they are in some respects obviously the tip of the pyramid in terms of where one would hope good practice would cascade. So what I'm thinking already. So my goal, hopefully, is to look at mapping out who are the institutions who could be helpful, who WHO have to listen to, like these non-state actors, and to use targeted communications and media board conferences to actually bring pressure to bear and expose what is or is not happening. The last slide I want to share is this one, because it hands over lovely to Adam, who did excellent work last year on pushing for why are we using baggy blues? We may as well put a sack over our head. I'll come back onto video, but more useful might be some of the 39 slides I didn't share with you, where if for nothing else to just frame some thinking. And for me, the issue is, and this is where I want to share and ask and seek input from all of you, is I feel there's so many health institutions out there. I mean, I certainly worked with a fraction of them in my 30 years in international public health, and there must be more out there who both could be allies for the messages we need to push through, but also who, because of their special position and their special relationships with people like the WHO and others, they can. They can't be ignored in the same way that I can be ignored. I mean, one of the expressions from last year's Unpolitics, which stuck in my brain, was I feel like I'm honking in traffic, and that's where I think we need to. I need anyway to step back, be more strategic and more tactical. So, clear, who are we trying to get to? Where are there not vulnerabilities, but where are the potential entry points, and who can help us get that entry point? And things like, the World Health Assembly every May, these 219 non-state actors, they're there. They have to be listened to. And so far as I can tell, I haven't seen anybody raising these issues in a very substantive way, if at all, in fact. And I did try, and when I was on the drafting panel for the UK for the pandemic accord, I tried very, very hard to get some intelligent language into it. And I tried to reach out to some of the NSAs. I mean, this is very bad practice for the government to actually reach out to other non-governmental agencies, say, come on, this is an important agenda here that is, we're all brothers and sisters in public health. cuts the different institutional bases that we come from. We can't have a pandemic accord that is completely silent on prevention and IAQ, and yet that's exactly where we are. So this is where this is just a snapshot of some of the non-state actors that potentially we could work with, because they should be on our side. I mean, like the International Council of Nurses, surely it's in their interest to protect the health of their members and to ensure that the IPC that is being applied is actually effective and stopping them getting sick and dying unnecessarily. It just seems like a no-brainer, which is why I have to step back and take a deep breath, because I find the level of boneheadedness to be quite, not with them in particular or anyone in particular, but to be quite breathtaking. So for me, I'm really seeking to engage with all of you here now in how we can perhaps better strategize and engage in a way that might actually leverage some meaningful changes. And earlier in my presentation, I talked about some of the commitments that have already been made, and this one is from the recent December 2025 COVID coronavirus disease threat management plan. Just read this out. Member states should work to improve indoor ventilation and air quality in public and shared spaces such as schools, workplace, transport hubs, healthcare facilities, aligned with WHO guidance. Investments in long-term air quality improvements not only mitigate coronavirus transmission but support overall respiratory health resilience. And as you know, tuberculosis, measles, these are all hugely amenable to these interventions, and we seem to be in a position where vaccines and pharmaceuticals are the only solutions we're willing to go to. Sorry, I need to hand it over to other people, so I would apologise if I'm rambling a bit. But as you can see, this has obsessed me somewhat for the last sort of 5 years, and it has been very difficult having to leave my post, because I really felt I had no common language with my colleagues anymore. They were just obeying orders, forgive the rather brutal comment, but they were, it wasn't coming down the chain from the top. It wasn't on their agenda.
Just wanted to report on what happened coming out of the July 2025 inaugural on politics meeting. So a group of us, including Yanir and myself and Lisa Toth, who is online, I believe, Shbella Solomon, Joe Vipond, who's online, I think, Greta Fox I've seen, and Lotta Oxenen, took over the lead role in writing probably a 6-page letter to the leadership of WHO. We got about 80 luminaries to endorse it. It's very small, but I'll be sharing these slides. So that list is on the right-hand side. And then I believe about 2,800 others who signed online, researchers, patients, advocates of many stripes. So it was a big effort, carefully written letter to be forceful, but praiseworthy were warranted. And you can see in the left-hand side on the box with the gray shading here that in summary, we are trying to impress upon the WHO that surgical masks are ineffective and counterproductive, that WHO has belatedly admitted that COVID is an airborne disease, and therefore that personal protective equipment is a reasonable part of a multi-pronged strategy. Sorry, I'm not doing the slideshow properly. Okay, just a couple more graphics just to give a sense of the fallout from this letter. Yanir tweeted out a lot of very popular tweets in the late fall. This is one of mine from late October when we were trying to find more endorsers, 103,000 impressions. The graphic I used is from a 2021 article in PLOS One, one of the better studies showing what we've all known for decades, that N95s and FFP2 respirators, they are true respirators. Masks, such as the surgical mask, are not, and that's why the protection afforded by a real respirator is just night and day different. So the people in the US and elsewhere who said that masks don't work were either completely right or completely wrong, depending on what they meant by the word mask. And as a personal peeve of mine. The epidemiology on this is conflicting, but in my view, as an epidemiologist, it's useless. We should not be looking at infection rates or death rates or hospitalization rates and pretend that we know that there is such a thing as a intervention group who are using respirators or masks and a control group who are not. There's way too much overlap. We are not following people when they leave work. And of course, the signal is attenuated when people who are supposed to be in the intervention group end up getting COVID at home or in their communities. So on the top right, another tweet of mine that got some nice praise from various people for the quip that I made to The Guardian, which I'll show you in a minute, that the surgical mask is to a respirator what the typewriter is to a personal computer. It's obsolete. We do not miss typewriters. Mr. Smith and Mr. Corona may miss them, but the rest of the world does not. On the bottom right, a little interchange on Twitter with a US-based cardiologist at Hopkins. I think is very emblematic of a lot of other feedback I've gotten before and after this letter. He says, well, we're already wearing N95s when necessary, when we, the healthcare workers, are at risk, when we are in the presence of infected patients. And I somewhat intemperately said, how about retiring if you're giving no thought to do no harm to your own patients thanks to asymptomatic transmission? So we got a very good write-up in The Guardian in early January. We timed it to appear at the same time that WHO got their letter the day before. They were not ready to comment, which we expected. And Yanir has sent a follow-up letter to them just last week saying it's been a month or two. It's time that we met virtually and started to talk about these issues. So in addition, we got a write-up in Forbes. I just wanted to point out we are in no way the first to come to this realization. Here's a very good video from the John Snow Project about the same issues. And if you have time to read, this is another private exchange on Facebook with a couple of clinicians. And again, it's all about how burdensome N95s are. We know better. We know when to wear them and when not to. And this guy, who's a very good clinician, talks about it should not be the patient's preference as to what they wear. He says, we're professionals. This isn't Burger King. So that's the mindset that we need to overcome, among others.
Desmond, you want to take questions? So from
please, please.
Comments, please, everyone, feel free. Maybe we will remove the spotlight now. And who has comments? Please click raise hand, and we will pick one by one. Jeffrey, please go ahead.
I just totally praise your stalwartness and persistence and individual initiative. I would like to dialogue with you about a particular phrase you use. You called the opponents boneheads. To me, that stops understanding who they are.
Apologies to all boneheads, myself included.
Yes, I agree. But institutions are run by individuals. They have hierarchies of influence and authority within the institutions. And what you've demonstrated is that we need to dive deeper into the motivations of those individuals who are standing up in opposition to common sense preventive medicine, which is now scientifically well demonstrated. These are not boneheads, they're assholes. Yeah. So let's move forward or backward or underneath and find out what's going on.
Exactly.
Well, let's move on.
Yep.
Let's move on. Jeffrey. Dorothy, please. Dorothy, go ahead.
Thanks. So I'm writing a book about workers' experiences in the pandemic and lessons from it. And in that process, it's become clear to me that this opposition to real effective respiratory protection for healthcare workers in particular has a long history to it that is complicated these days by the well, one is that the infectious prevention and control folks, the IPAC folks, really don't understand or don't want to understand what aerosols are and what airborne transmission is all about. And it's based on a misunderstanding going back to Chapin in 1910 and others, other work that was done by Wells and others. But that's been picked up by, so there's that. And they really don't want to say that they've been wrong. That's just so clear. The other thing is that if you look at who then sort of picks up on that, there are some pretty serious alt-right connections. And so I can describe those if people are interested, but I'm just saying that they're there. And so I think what's really important in this is they're more than boneheads and whatever names we want to throw at them. Are people with vested interests, and there's power issues here, and so trying to figure out who I think it's very important to try and figure out who the allies are that are actually able to take on that power, and to recognize whether we're talking about the folks that did the Cochrane review and how that's been used, or people that are involved in what we Canadians call the Loeb study, which was a very unethical study, that this is just a really complicated picture, and it's not as simple as convincing people that are having people agree that yes, hazards can be transmitted in the air. There are interests here, and we have to figure out how to deal with them.
I hadn't thought of this before, but Desmond, when you mentioned the World Health Assembly, I've never been, but I do understand that that's a place where people gather to make decisions, and maybe we need to be inserting ourselves into such spaces. And I don't know if there are other spaces similar to the World Health Authority or the World Health Assembly that would be amenable to us filling the space and asking awkward questions. But it seems like we're having a hard time being invited into the decision-making room. So maybe we need to invite ourselves into them. I also just want to follow up Dorothy's comment about the kind of, for lack of a better term, the other side, which is the Hennigan, Jefferson, Conley, Loeb crew. They are hosting an annual conference. The next one's going to be in May, and it's really an anti-masking, anti-evidence, anti-vaccine conference, hosted by the Oxford University and the University of Calgary, my institution. This year, Jay Bhattacharya is going to be one of the key speakers. I think the general world understands that Bhattacharya is I don't want to say evil actor, but like a maleficent actor. And maybe we need to draw attention to those connections so that that group of people perhaps has less cachet than they've had in the past. They still seem to own the space, and I don't understand why. But I'd love to hear other comments, including Desmond's.
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to respond in a systematic way to all the points that are fantastic points. And thank you very much for making me move on from my boneheads insult. I need to go back up to the beginning of the alphabet and work my way down. But I think absolutely right to an analysis of incentives and disincentives. And I think that's where, sorry, I've got sunlight coming in and it's making some strange visual effects. This is why I try to identify and pick on those commitments and promises that have already been made but haven't been followed up on. So it's not like we're trying to ram something down the throat that they haven't already said themselves. But in terms of, look at that fantastic letter that Adam pulled together and a really impressive list of signatories and supporters. Boing, it just bounced off the medieval ramparts of the WHO building, and this is where I'm thinking, there's 217, sometimes 219, non-state actors that they sort of have to listen to. They're on their board. The World Health Assembly is the board of the WHO, and I'm trying not to believe that those are hand-picked for their, sycophantic supineness, because actually there's some really good people, individual and institutions in there. And if we can encourage them to start, actually say, look, you produced this wonderful, guidance and this wonderful report and wonderful strategy. Can we see some progress? Is there any, targets? Is there any budget? And at the moment, as far as I can tell, and forgive me if I haven't done exhaustive research, nobody has challenged them on these things. And that's where I think it's so easy for them to swan around in a virtual parallel universe that leaves bodies piling high at the door. Because in the little esoteric bubbles that they inhabit, they don't have to face these questions because they're carefully selecting who they speak to and listen to. That might be me being very biased, having spent 2 years in Geneva in the UN AIDS building next door to WHO. Oh my God, I'm still in recovery. Anyway, that was really my first sort of thinking for the next steps is, how to map out the allies, how to map it. And I do apologize, I've never been in the military, but increasingly I find that war studies and military strategy is the only way to go at this, because it really is like that. Sorry, I hope that hasn't answered anybody's questions, has it?
Thank you, Desmond. Now, Lisa, please.
Okay, I agree with all the comments leading up to me because we're all on the same team. But in terms of who are our natural allies, insurance companies have to pay out for sick people. They like to take money in, but they don't like to pay money out. And there are two kinds of insurance companies that could be natural allies for us. One are the insurance companies who indemnify healthcare providers for malpractice. So up till now, there haven't been too many lawsuits against hospitals. There was one in France, but there haven't been too many against hospitals for people getting infected in the hospital. But, lawyers, particularly in America, are very creative, and I can see the day when it will come, much like the tobacco lawsuits came. And so wouldn't it be a good idea to engage with the insurance companies to have them require certain standards of air quality in order to insure the hospitals or to insure the doctors' offices or whatever, because they're the ones who have to pay out when patients get sick. And surely they're noticing that more patients are getting sick and that they're having to pay out more. So that was one idea that I had, was that perhaps we could figure out a way to rope in, to get in with the insurance companies, because they have a financial incentive to keep people well. There aren't too many people who do have that financial incentive, but they do. Anyway, it's just a thought. Thanks.
Excuse me, give me 2 minutes. I'm from the Geneva Health Forum, which was established in 2006 by the University of Geneva and the University Hospitals of Geneva in Switzerland. And we've organized the first WHO Europe Indoor Air Conference, supported also by the Swiss Federal Office of Public Health, which, by the way, released last year the new Swiss National Pandemic Plan, where airborne transmission, ventilation, and IAQ monitoring is added within the non-pharmaceutical interventions. And we're moving forward with a project to achieve a WHO resolution, as a World Health Assembly resolution, and are open for collaborations and organizing various conferences. We would really appreciate if you want to come on site or support with your logo, or if you are a patient organization, a university, or an NGO or whatever. So we would be very pleased to add you in this project, because we need kind of, everyone who wants healthy indoor air, and also this change, regarding the masks. I think it's a good place to achieve a change. And I will add my contact details into the chat, and you can call me or email me anytime. Thank you very much.
So Irene actually prepared a set of remarks, I think. Irene, do you feel like you've made your remarks, or would you like to do that now? Because we can wait on the conversation.
I can share the project and give you some insights if you want. I think, we target 194 member states. And the project is already international and diverse and heterogeneous. But we miss India, and maybe you have contact, you want to join this project. So shall I
Fantastic.
say my piece?
Desmond, what would you like to do? It's your workshop.
No, I think it sounds like a fascinating initiative, and I think I'm trying not to be too cynical about this, because I'm also aware that the UN IAQ side event in September, there was an excellent presentation given by Amprou from the French Minister of Global Public Health. But she was also sitting on the negotiating board for the pandemic accord, which could have made a tangible, strategic, and powerful, difference at that time. And she didn't. And I think for my time working with the UN in Geneva, I'm very sort of concerned about that's often hugely energetic processes and sometimes products don't necessarily then translate into meaningful, tangible action and guidance that people will follow. I mean, and that's why those little bits I've shared in terms of WHO TB guidance, the COVID-19 plan, the operational plan, and the Global Fund, strategic plan. Silence, no follow-up, no action, no traction, no impact. That's where I'm trying to focus my time.
I have a different impression, and I mean, it's not very fast, but we are moving forward. We have to understand that that there are also many other problems like wars. I mean, all these movements within the global, I mean, the USA and Russia, there are so many problems. But I've heard, for example, from Germany that aerosol scientists are sending applications to get money from defense regarding bioweapons. So everything is kind of moving, and the Geneva Health Forum is working very closely with the Air Club, this global pledge for healthy indoor air, and it's so good because already 2 countries signed, and we have some progress we put together and go together, and I think we can be successful. And if not, then we can submit this resolution in the next year. But we see that the second European Indoor Air Conference, organized by the Geneva Health Forum, supported by the WHO Europe, was kind of successful because it gave this country within this large project, which has the goal to achieve the resolution, the chance to find a national consensus. And the consensus of the conference, it was last year in June in the Senate in Paris, was or is that indoor air is an urgent problem of public health, and they agreed to 11 steps they want to move on. One of the steps is to create a specific commission, a political commission of the parliament for indoor air and other steps. So I think we move forward, but very slow.
Let me ask a question, because this conversation I feel is extraordinarily important. If I understand correctly, there are actions that are being taken, but the question that Desmond is asking, and I think that was my understanding, is that it's a question of whether we are in fact on a trajectory of implementation. Am I understanding correctly, Desmond?
Yes, you're much more diplomatic than me, Yanir, even though I've been a diplomat for most of my working life. I spent so much of my working life, certainly my time in the UN, doing basically what was very little more than theatre. And I couldn't actually, after 2 years, see any tangible shift or change that I'd made, despite any number of conferences and reports. And
I think that part of the question then should be this discussion, because please recognize that most of the people in the room, including me, are not aware of the inner workings of the global, let's call them health organizations writ large, and the national efforts that are associated with them. But the point is that we are engaging with this because we would like really to make this advance. And so it seems to me that figuring out what are the pieces that can be used together, where are there opportunities, is still a very important conversation. And again, I'm not familiar with it, but I think that this is exactly the kind of thing that a small group getting together and looking at what are the planned trajectories and what are the ways to move forward that you're thinking about and they're thinking about, Irene's aspects of it, might be helpful in working this forward. Am I correct? Is that right?
I just want to say we see not only at the World Health Organization that the countries are the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization is really small. It has the budget of a large university hospital, larger. Right? And I mean, that the Swiss Federal Office of Public Health added in its new pandemic, national pandemic plan, airborne transmission, all this stuff is the work we do in our country, and also to achieve a resolution or higher goals, we need to catch our politicians and government people, experts, and invite them, and they come. It's not really on the agenda because there are worse problems like wars and economical problems and things like that. But if you catch them and you organize something and move on, they come. Huh?
I think this conversation can be continued. Let's probably go to Nicholas now.
Yes, hi there. Thank you. I mean, so the question I had, and just it's actually tying a little bit with Desmond's comment. I think what you're working on, and probably the first on politics, is there some kind of a register that was created where there's a list of stakeholders that sort of share positions with respect to airborne sort of infection prevention? So almost like I understand there's the people that attend these types of meetings, right? So you have this list. Has there been an effort to maybe approach different universities, different organizations to see if they are aligned on this topic? And therefore we have people we can source if ever there are sort of larger endeavors that need to be made. I mean, one of the most recent ones where we saw the Olympic teams, where a lot of the athletes were wearing masks, so the doctors probably had some sort of conscious understanding of airborne infection, airborne sort of pathogen prevention. Maybe reaching out to those Olympic teams, like the one who wore a mask and just won a gold medal and broke a world record. He may attribute his success, also to the fact that he wasn't sick. So maybe reaching out to these teams, and we create a list of people who could maybe come and support and to sort of I would say they could almost be ambassadors for these types of efforts.
So if I can just jump in, I think before Yanir corrects me, I mean, this is what we're starting to try and do, a sort of a political economy landscape analysis. I mean, again, forgive the military metaphors. I'm really not a military person, but we have sort of enemies and potential allies, and we have definite allies, and we have strategic weaknesses or potential openings, and I think this is where I need to try and help map all this out so that the energy we can bring to this, because this is all people in their spare time, is more targeted to those activities that are likely to shift the gear a bit. Because I think I remember, well, so forgive me if I'm being very rude about my previous employers, but certainly in the UNAIDS it was like a huge PR company, and it was so easy to make a promise and then move on and make a new promise to distract from the fact you haven't kept any of your previous ones, and that's what I'm seeing here. There's some really good language, commitments, strategic promises, for if you like, that are just fallen flat. And even getting to that, making the promise stage must have been so much hard work for somebody. But if it's just words on the page, then it's pretty useless, really.
I think Adam is next.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of quick observations. One, Nicholas, I was also struck by the Olympics. I think it not for me to do, but if somebody wanted to do a public service video, I think the message there is that to the layperson, your tomorrow, your day is as important to you as their big day is to them. They didn't want to get sick in the middle of the biggest day of their lives. Why should anyone? In terms of other possible allies, I like the idea of insurance companies. I think Dorothy may have asked in the chat about the U.S. version of an accreditation association. I don't know much about them. They used to be kind of our enemy at OSHA, but it used to be called JCO, and now it's called the Joint Commission. And yeah, I think somebody should approach them and start talking about respirator policy as one of the things that ought to be part of the accreditation. But maybe more useful analogy would be things like Underwriters Laboratory and the former EPA's Energy Star program. If there was a way to allow patients to choose offices and hospitals that are respirator safe or respirator users as opposed to not, that's a great MAGA free market. You choose where you want to go. And if there was a voluntary seal on the door that says you are entering a facility where we understand that surgical masks, something is better than nothing, and respirators are better than masks. And then finally, as an ally, I will point out that one of the endorsers of the letter is the CEO of the International Safety Equipment Association, 3M and Bullard and Honeywell, the people who make both surgical masks and N95s. And I would, if I had time and some partners, I'd love to go talk to their board of directors about them being more active. They get it, I think, and they make both products, and they're going to make more money if they make fewer surgical masks and more 75-cent N95. So I think they're a huge potential ally for this.
Thanks, Adam. Yanir, you had your hand up for a while.
I've been trying to think about things, so I didn't hear everything that Adam said, but I just wanted to point to something. This was the point that I really wanted to make, which was this article that came out among the articles that were published in response to the letter was this article in Business Upturn that talks about kind of the institutional/legal issues that are raised by the letter that was submitted. And it's a very strong letter saying that the very fact that we wrote this letter put everyone on notice that this is an issue. And by being put on notice, that gives responsibility for them to respond to this situation and to ensure safety of workers and patients. I do think that this is an important perspective. I don't know yet how we incorporate this into the process that is being built. But again, I just wanted to bring it to the attention of this discussion.
So a couple of things I wanted to suggest in terms of some practical measures forward, but one was Adam, to respond partly to one of your points about involving the respirator companies. You should know that at least in the Canadian setting, the one of the responses that there has been to the those who are advocating for respiratory protection, effective respiratory protection, is that they're in the hands of the respirator companies, and it's all about making money for the respirator companies. So that can be dealt with, but I'm just telling you that that's one of the arguments. So I think that there are two things that would be really would be good, given all the people here and sort of the various things that people have been talking about. One is to try and make a list of all the efforts that are going on nationally and internationally around both healthy air So there's that global group that Lydia Morawska is part of. There's a variety of things. There's what Irene was talking about. And then to do something, use a tool that I've used in other settings called the Spectrum of Allies. And it's an analytical tool that helps you figure out where people are at, or there's a power mapping one as well you can use, but it's a similar kind of thing of figuring out where people are on sort of this spectrum of allies. And then you go from there to figure out who's going to approach whom or how you're going to deal with them. And I think that's, anyway, as a step forward, those two things would be very useful. I'm part of the Canadian Aerosol Transmission Coalition, and I know that we've tried to do some of that when we come to looking at the proposals or pillars that we've been working on and getting them out there. Anyway, I see your point, Adam, about them making more money, but I'm just saying you have to, that it's the docs who the IPAC folks, that's part of their argument. And just we have to figure out how to respond to that. Thanks.
Thanks, Dorothy. Responses to that before we go on to Vicky? Okay, we'll go on to Vicky.
Thank you. I have two comments, one of which is actually due to my kid who works in healthcare. And they commented that at the check-in, whether you do it online from home the day before or when you arrive at the office, it would be really easy to program in. I would like my providers to wear masks or respirators. And it doesn't solve all problems because, of course, the same exam room could have been used previously without protection. But it solves one problem very easily and takes the burden off the person to raise it with their provider directly, to have the system ask them. The other comment, I apologize because I was on a different Zoom earlier, so apologies if it was already raised. I think one of the really big obstacles to respirator use, at least in hospitals, is the standard that airborne disease requires negative pressure rooms, which is appropriate for measles, but not really appropriate at a time when, a hospital may have dozens or hundreds of patients who are COVID infected. And so I think there's a lot of reluctance by providers to say that any that any airborne disease, any ordinary disease like COVID or flu can be airborne, and that we probably need to revise the standards for when negative pressure rooms are required so that hospitals could sign on to respirator protection without signing on to negative pressure rooms.
Thank you, Vicky. I see Sunil's hand up, but just want to leave space on the line in case there are comments.
Yes, I think because Desmond talked about tuberculosis, so I just refer to that also. Having seen tuberculosis for last so many years now, and Desmond said that when you talk of the treaties, you find the words in the letters, but you don't find them being implemented. I primarily see this as a problem of moderation. Who moderates the discussion on a particular aspect? So who at this point in time is moderating the discussion on tuberculosis? Unfortunately, there is a very select few who moderate discussion on airborne transmission or who moderate discussion on tuberculosis. And primarily because they moderate, they will tell you, let's put it in the, not directly, they will tell you, let's put it in the paper, let's show our intent to what we are trying to do, but it is difficult to implement. I give you a very simple example. In India, we invest a lot of money at this point in time for TB elimination. And when you go on the ground and want to see how exactly that implementation strategy is rolled out, we have difficulties. For example, the testing for TB, the cartridges that are being supplied for testing for TB come from one single company. And that single company is supposed to supply all the kits across the country. Any damage to the supply chain system, any disruption of the supply chain system, any delay in the supply chain system puts back the investigations, puts back the testing by a month or so. But we have not been able to build the alternative because the discussion on that, who is going to test, what's the best test, what is the best modality of doing, is moderated by a select few. So unless and until we are able to create a mass of counter arguments, unless and until we are able to create a group of people who are able to present a counter argument as solid as the argument that's going on, as solid as the narrative that's going on, I don't think we will be winning the race. We will continue to be on this side. Second important thing is what I have seen over the last, again, 10, 15 years is despite the fact that you may be working with a counter argument, you tend to ally with the argument that is prevalent, the fashionable argument that is prevalent with regard to diseases, whether it was COVID, whether it was tuberculosis. Very few tend to move towards the other side. Even if you are on the other side, you eventually tend to be on the same side, maybe in a slightly different way, subtler way, but you continue to be on the same side. So unless and until you build that counter argument through a good number of people, build that evidence, I don't think we will be on the winning side. Thank you.
Desmond, do you want to comment on that, or?
Yeah, I've just shared. Okay, it's a very short document. Oh, it's a very huge document, but it's a global TB report. It's only a fact sheet, but it's full of graphics. So in the very beginning of it, it says TB is airborne, and then there's not a single mention of anything about airborne or airborne transmission reduction. In the rest of the document, it's purely treatment and prevention through treatment, basically, in early detection. And that's despite the TB guidance themselves being clear that actually these are some of the strategies we should be using in terms of indoor air quality control, filtration, UV disinfection. So you're right. But I think where I feel a bit frustrated, if you like, and a bit powerless, is that when these are being tabled to places like the World Health Assembly, nobody says this. Nobody questions, why are you missing, the non-pharmaceutical interventions that your own documents say are important. And that's where I'm thinking if we can find allies with that seat at the table, because getting a seat at that table could be quite difficult. And I confess, I don't know what that process is. I would love to see the World Health Network become one of the non-state actors sitting every year at the World Health Assembly. But I think people might not want it next to us. Well, not me anyway.
There's no other hands raised now, and we are getting toward the end of the formal part of the workshop, the last 15 minutes being geared for next steps. Desmond, do you want to sum up a little bit where we are, and maybe we can invite people to really focus on specific next steps and maybe invite people to suggest things that they might be interested in participating in?
Well, I think I should just also mention I will reply to Irene later on that I didn't mean to be sort of dismissive about her intervention, but I'm not sure if I can see how we can really add much to it, because they've already got so much momentum and mapped out a clear way forward, and they're doing it and they're achieving it. And I personally am not sure if we can add a lot of value to that. I think for me, what I'm really looking for is building on the excellent work that came last year out of the Unpolitics, in the work that Adam and the team were leading in that really strong and clear and logical challenge, if you like, to WHO's current guidance and communication. So building on that, are there more, and then mapping out what the lay of the land might be for future engagements, and who our allies might be, and what the opportunities for in getting our foot in the door and getting our concerns and listened to. That's where I really am looking at. It's too much for one person, obviously, and it's also I'm not clever enough to do. I've only had a very particular set of experiences through my life, in working in international public health. So it really is one of these things that more hands to the wheel would be extremely welcome.
With that being the call to action, Again, Desmond is very modest, but I can tell you over the last few months, he's been doing miracles in terms of making things move forward. And I think that the point is that he has a plan of how to move things forward. There are several opportunities that are available. One is to participate in that effort. If anybody has suggestions or desire to participate, either speak up or put your names in the chat so that we can connect you off after the workshop. That I think is an important step forward. And the other is if there are also people who would like to think about additional directions or supportive directions, things that are, this is a all hands on deck, many different directions of action kind of thing. And if anybody would like to talk about that or suggest things to be done, this might be a good time. We can also talk about other things. We have still 15 minutes left, so there's a little bit of time. And if please raise your hands, or there are other comments that should be made. This is kind of the time period for it. Any thoughts? I think there are 3 people who are interested in participating. Desmond, with you, at least.
Fantastic. Yeah, that would be. I'm super grateful. Thank you very much. I did share earlier in the chat the full 18 slides of which I tried to summarize in my 5-minute framing. There's the screenshots and web links to the documents and strategies and plans that I referred to, just to give a bit more background about why I think those might be our best first sort of attack, if you like.
Thanks, Desmond. And Dorothy's hand is up, please.
I just saw the chat and see that I've been volunteered. I'd be happy to help. Sort of, as I said earlier, I think that it's really important to try and figure out just who the players are, and then sort of figure out where they are in terms of allyship, and where there are opportunities. There's various other tools that you can use to sort of where are the opportunities to get to them, for lack of a better term. Desmond, if I've been volunteered, I can try to help.
Thank you very much. No, it would be hugely welcome. I mean, I think, yeah, on one of the other spaces on Slack, I don't know, Yanir, if everyone knows about this. You know, we have, and Yanir's structured it out. So, and I've been desperately trying to fill it in. So you're doing the sort of the detective work. You know, what are the institutions? Where do they stand currently? Who are the key people we need to write to? Because obviously just writing to an institution usually doesn't get you anywhere. And then that would be a good, I think in itself, that would be quite a good first step, because I would like to actually ask quite pointed questions to people like, I mean, the union I was a member of when I was working for the UK Foreign Office was completely hopeless on COVID protections. And I was offering them my time and support and guidance as a 30-year senior public health specialist in the UK, just totally disinterested, which is really terrifying if the union that's meant to be there for your health, welfare and safety is away with the fairies on this.
Yeah, well, there are unions in the UK that have been good on this, and the Hazards campaign in particular has connections. Yes. So I'm a long-time hazards person from my training as a hygienist.
Thank you.
Sheila, please go ahead.
This is an area where I have absolutely no expertise whatsoever. However, I do have a little bit of expertise in helping organizations and institutions and communities put together system maps. And what I think you're describing is exactly that, where you really identify, where are the boundaries of the system, what's inside the system, what's outside the system, who are the major stakeholders. You identify them all. You identify all of their visions and missions, because that's where you may for the first time, really identify conflicts of visions that are frequently at the root of dysfunction. And anyway, it's something I certainly would be willing to work with somebody on. And I think it might, once you put it together, I think the group that puts it together and then shares it, and then lots of people are going to, put their inputs into it, you'll have something that at least will, it's not going to solve anything, but it's a learning tool to help you better understand your system. It's just a suggestion from an outsider.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's extremely valuable. Yeah. And that's why I think, because I know I can be a bit, when I get, when I call people boneheads, somehow the diplomatic niceties tend to break down. So yeah, what I'm trying to do is actually start from where they've already made a promise. So I'm not trying to convince them of anything. They've already accepted the evidence, and they've accepted that there needs to be policy and action, but nothing has happened. And so, a lot of that initial sort of legwork or barriers have been overcome. That's what I'm hoping anyway.
Well, one of the things a system map may help you identify are what are the barriers to action? And it's one of the most important ones, because frequently it's politics. Even though we're on politics, the reality is frequently it's the politics.
Yeah.
Frequently, a lot of people say, oh, well, we have no money to do this, but it isn't the money. It's the politics.
Exactly.
And
No,
there
I
are
agree.
different strategies that you would use for, to deal with that than if you just, didn't have the right amount of money.
I agree. I agree completely. Yep.
Thanks, Sheila. Naomi, and then we'll go to Nicola after.
Desmond, the thing that's sort of resonating most for me in your comments is at the very beginning of your comments, you talked about the fact that, as you've been saying, the WHO and these other organizations all acknowledge what we need them to acknowledge, but there's a disconnect in their action, and they're not transparent, and therefore they're not held accountable. There's no one holding them to account for what they actually say. Now, a lot of that is politics and so forth and so on. The question is, what can we do in this group? Many of us are outsiders to this world. How do we, like we did last year with the WHO, with a letter to WHO about masking in healthcare and respirators in healthcare? What can we do to help move this forward and maintain some kind of a constructive relationship with these organizations that we still need?
Well, I think just briefly, I'm sorry, I know there's still a couple of hands there, but I don't know if we'll ever get a reply, if Adam and team will ever get a reply from WHO on that fantastic letter. But I get the feeling, the fact that it was reported in so many, respected journals, and the BMJ and the Guardian, and a number of, and just recently the Irish Independent, Tess Finch-Lees wrote an excellent piece just at the weekend. I think that makes it much more difficult to ignore. And I think also that if we can get into an alliance with some of the very good institutions that do sit at the WHO table, and actually help them understand that actually there's more that we can do here. There's more that needs to be done, and it really is fitting in with your existing agenda and existing mandate. Because I was finding that there was sympathetic ears in some of those institutions, but I wasn't able to follow it through. I mean, also I was a big bad donor, so they really were, I think, a bit nervous about me coming to talk to them without actually giving them money, and trying to encourage them to sort of influence from their side also the wording of an official WHO document, publication, the Pandemic Accord. But I feel as though this is not a dialogue that has been attempted yet. Because I haven't seen it anywhere else. I haven't seen anywhere else flagging up that 2 years ago, the Global Fund promised in their strategy that things needed to be done about IAQ, and then followed up with nothing. No indicators, no targets, no budgets, no actions. Nobody's flagged that up. And I think just raising awareness of these gaps, I think, is a start, because I think it makes it more difficult to keep looking away from it and keep dropping the ball. I think. I mean, that's maybe an act of faith-based, actions on my behalf.
Thank you, Desmond. Nicola, please.
Thanks. I'm fascinated with listening into this great conversation here. I did very briefly touch on countercartography in my presentation, and as I said, it's a huge topic and something I've been involved with for a long time. It really is a different way of mapping some of these systems and starting at the grassroots level. So when Naomi asked, what can we do as outsiders? This is what countercartography offers, is an ability to create maps that turn things upside down. So instead of starting at the system level and creating a map that shows how it was intended to work, but probably isn't, it starts at the grassroots and maps things from the bottom up. So I'm more than happy to throw my hat into the ring as being part of that, the ability to do that. I mean, it often starts small, but I mean, the reason we have 13 provinces and territories in Canada is because of countercartography groups that got together, mapped how systems were and weren't working, and presented alternative maps of the systems to governments and different levels. So there's a lot of power behind it, and there's a lot of things that it can be done to